All right. Well, once again, in case you forgot, I am Beatrice Stephen Pons. I am an employer outreach coordinator at GoDCGo, and we are here today to talk about smarter strategies for a bike-ready workplace. So to start off, I have an agenda, so we have an idea of what's ahead of us. We're going to begin by talking about what is GoDCGo for those of you who have not worked with us in a while or for whom this might be your first time. Then we're going to talk about the advantage of a bike-ready workplace and move on to discuss fundamentals and strategies. From there, we're going to talk about our employer recognition program and then give insight onto how you can stay up to date on our upcoming events. So, GoDCGo is an initiative of the District Department of Transportation. We offer complimentary transit resources and consulting services to DC organizations and commuters, and our main goal is to decrease traffic, improve air quality, and create a better quality of life in the DC area. So, especially for our employers in the audience, essentially this all means that all of our services are completely free to you as DC organizations, and we can talk you through what might be best solutions for your transportation concerns in completely free consultative services that we offer. Okay, an advantage of a bike-ready workplace. We're going to first start off by defining what we mean by bike-ready. Simply, this essentially just means that you're cultivating a work site where you have the appropriate amenities to be prepared and ready for any of the biking needs of your commuters. And this could be people who bike very regularly, as well as people who might do it very occasionally and just be considering potentially biking to work. And this has a lot of benefits to you as an employer. By encouraging more biking to your work site that can improve the air quality, specifically around your site as well as in the DC region in general, which can help not only DC become a more pleasant place to live and work, but also specifically your corner of the region becoming a much more pleasant place for people to spend time, whether as visitors, potential customers, and of course as employees. A similar thing for traffic by having just better traffic, congestion be somewhat more moderated. Your own employees can get to the work site a lot more easily and seamlessly, as well as anyone that you might want to be able to come visit your site. It's also super helpful for recruiting and retention. So naturally, if someone already knows that they're a fan of bike commuting, being able to see that a potential employer has the requisite amenities for that to be a seamless and feasible process is really key. But also for people who might not necessarily be bike commuters, just presenting yourself as an employer that offers options and a full suite of potential ways people can get to work is super important and very attractive. And especially because people move, things change. If people's life conditions change such that biking to work might make more sense, having those amenities already in place or looking to pursue expanding them is a great way to retain talent within your organization. Encouraging bike commuting is also a very smart idea simply because by having that physical activity, before people go about and start their day, it can help employees start off really energized, improve their brain function and cognition, and begin the day a little bit more alert than they might otherwise. Also, biking has a tendency to have a great culture around it, and it can be a means to build team morale. So people who might end up using similar bike lanes or storing their bikes at similar times of the day can have those small moments to connect with one another, either within the same team or across teams. And since biking is an easy way for people to get their daily recommended exercise without necessarily having to go to a gym or set aside specific time, they're already commuting. They're going to do that anyways. And so having that be part of their everyday life is a good way for it to not take additional time and have a bit more of a crisp schedule. And just as there might be those day-by-day benefits of having that physical fitness, such as the alert attention that we talked about, it also can be a great way to handle the daily stresses of ordinary life. And each day that people go about trying to have some of that physical activity in their day, those benefits also compound over the long term. And as you by putting these amenities and supports in place, your employees can become healthier, more fit overall, and that can lead to unexpected cost savings, such as lowered healthcare premiums. Also, since bicycles are relatively pretty small, especially compared to cars, you can also face unexpected cost savings simply by having lower parking demand. One parking spot that might just be helpful for one employee can then be converted to house essentially storage for multiple bikes and therefore help out multiple employees. Because of this efficiency associated with bikes, it's great in terms of storing at the work site, but it's also great in terms of actually getting to work on time. The average commute for biking often can be 23 minutes versus 30 minutes by car. Even though cars naturally are a lot faster than bikes, it's very easy to overlook how much traffic can add to that time. And sometimes by prioritizing bike commuting, your employees might be able to get to work in a much more timely fashion. Bikes are also a lot cheaper, and so they can also be a much more cost-effective commute mode to potentially support. So $300 is a reasonable cost to get for a new bike. And if you were interested in doing some component of a subsidy, whether for that full cost or maybe just some portion of it, it would go a lot farther in supporting your employees than if you were to try to do something similar to subsidize their use of a new personal vehicle. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the advantage of having a bike-ready workplace, let's talk about bike storage because that's the next thing that anyone who's commuting by bike is going to want to think about. So if you have a parking garage already or a few parking spots that might be part of your lease or something like that, you can change some of those parking spots into a place where you keep bikes. I've seen some employers do something similar. If you have a spare room somewhere in your building, you can retrofit that to be a bike room or build out lockers. If you own your building or if your building allows it, I know some, have different preferences if people are able to bring their bikes through the lobby, but if they are able to, some employees might be able, it might work well for them to keep their bikes near their desk, especially if there's one of those like folding bikes and things like that. And then if you're not in a position to be able to build something out, there's some really great freestanding vertical racks that are now on the market, and that doesn't necessarily require any, installation. And then the last thing I'd like to highlight here is finding a way to provide overnight storage. So sometimes there might be, really bad weather conditions or other emergencies, and being able to create a bike storage system where employees can, on occasion, leave their bike overnight, it provides great peace of mind. And additionally, with all of these options, just prioritizing trying to have secure indoor bike storage is huge so that employees during the workday know that at the end of the day, they don't have to worry about their bike still being there when they're trying to go home. So immediately after the ride, once people have stored away their bikes and they're getting ready, they just had all that physical activity. They might be they might really need a drink of water. So if it's possible, trying to have a water bottle refill station close to where you intend to have people keep their bikes is a great idea. Similarly, it is also helpful to have showers and lockers on site so that people can take a shower, change into a new set of clothes, and just become refreshed for the workday. If you're not in a position to be able to have that on site, partnering with a local gym is a great way to still provide that as an amenity. And then also, if it's, you can also try to create a space to have allow people to maybe hang their clothes so they can dry it during the day, or otherwise do some component of laundry. And then another bit that I also like to highlight, as you can see in this photo, is having some basic maintenance tools, such as like a bike pump or something just to adjust the gears. This is a great way to help ensure that your bike commuters can not only get into the office really seamlessly, but also tighten up or fix small things that might help them ride back a little bit safer when they're ready to go home. Okay. So now we're going to talk about how you can support new and occasional bike commuters. So we already talked a little bit about how it's beneficial to have bike commuters on an individual basis in terms of like how it can be a pretty healthy, a pretty inexpensive mode to choose of getting around and specifically going to work. And it's also beneficial to the organization in terms of potential cost savings, as well as, encouraging your employees to be able to be a bit healthier and start the day really alert. And it's also obviously really great for the region in terms of helping us manage traffic and the air quality. So there's a lot of good reasons to encourage people who might be on the fence, but a little bit curious to try biking. And one way that you can support these commuters is by hosting a bike safety class. So some people might have had some experience maybe in childhood biking. Maybe they go on trails for leisure, but they might not be as well aware of how to bike through the city and different safety concerns. So having a class that really speaks to that can really help people feel more comfortable thinking about biking to work. Also, some people don't know how to ride a bike. I have a really good friend of mine who didn't learn how to ride her bike until she was in her 20s. And WABA offers fantastic adult classes on how to bike. And she took one of those and now she's off. She's biking really comfortably and very confidently. And so partnering with WABA is also like a great idea to try to offer some of those classes to your employees or simply directing them to WABA as a great resource. And then another a great approach to supporting new and occasional bike commuters, but also just your bike commuters more generally, is the Capital Bike Share corporate program. So the Capital Bike Share offers great flexibility. My friend that I just mentioned, who learned how to ride a bike in adulthood, she first started off just riding Capital Bike Share. We talked about how bikes are relatively inexpensive, but they're still an investment. And so the ability to really inexpensively, if not free, by participating in the Capital Bike Share corporate program, the ability to rent a bike, try out bike commuting, and not necessarily have to commit fully to it is a great way for people to slowly build confidence in biking generally and biking specifically to work. It's also great for occasionally biking, since you can rent it for one particular trip. People can bike to work using Capital Bike Share and then choose to take transit back home. For people who bike really regularly, it can also be great because maybe their bike is in the repair shop and they still really love that as their day-to-day option, but then Capital Bike Share can help fill in those gaps. And we at GoDCGo can help connect you with our Capital Bike Share colleagues to try to set that up and offer general assistance. And we can also come on site once you've signed up for the program and offer a cabbie one-on-one, where we essentially give a presentation and talk through how your employees can best leverage the pretty robust network that they have, as well as raffle off a helmet. And then the region also has guaranteed ride home, where if people commute sustainably at least 2 times a week, the region will pay for up to 6 rides home in case of an emergency. And so for people who might be new to trying a new commute style and they're a little bit nervous, this is a great program that I often talk about as a kind of commuter insurance, so that they can take the plunge of trying something new, trying out bike commuting, but knowing that if there were to ever be an emergency for whatever reason, they're covered, they have a reliable ride to get home safely. And then another great way to support commuters is through bike buddy programs. So how bike buddy programs work is there'll be a more experienced, comfortable bike commuter, and they pair off with someone who might be a little bit less experienced, a little less comfortable with bike commuting to work. And by pairing together, they both get different benefits. So the more experienced biker gets the benefit of having someone ride with them, so they have increased visibility on the road, which helps them be a little bit more safer because it's easier to see them and not necessarily think, oh, no one's on this road. I can just drive this way and not worry about it. And then for the person who is biking with a more experienced biker, they have the benefit of being able to see how they handle city biking, how they manage in traffic, the different safety signals, things like that. And then also they get to have a built-in way to informally get information. I also want to talk about bike clubs because they can also serve a very similar focus, a similar purpose, whether they arise more informally or they're more formally created by the employer by having a way that employees can get together, talk about bikes, talk about how they commute by bike. They can share information very seamlessly so that they are well aware of, new developments that might be happening in the DC area. They have, easy access to maybe great recommendations on where to go to get their bike fixed up and lots of good information like that. Okay, so I also want to talk about the variety of bike commuting needs that is out there. This is not an exhaustive list, but in addition to the new and occasional bike commuters, there's people who might bike straight from home, straight to work. And there's also people who might bike to their nearest transit stop, whether that be a metro or a bus stop. And they might from there be able to get straight to work, or maybe from whatever metro they get off at, whatever bus stop they get off at, they then have to bike a little bit farther to get back to finish the rest of their journey and get to work. So this is what I'd call last mile bike commuters. And their needs are going to be a little bit different. These are commuters who are going to really not just value having transit benefits and transit related supports, not just for like the occasional commute, but it's part of their regular bike commuting. And then there's also e-bike commuters. So especially for people who might have different mobility needs and constraints, e-bikes are great because, they can still get that fresh air, they can still get a little bit of exercise, but with that electric assist, they can go a little bit easier without being as physically exhausted. But e-bikes also tend to be a little bit heavier. So this is something to think about as an employer when you're thinking about storage because of those people who might use e-bikes, they might, even if they're, really physically strong and they're not necessarily using it for mobility concerns, they're going to take up a little bit more space and it might be harder to hang that kind of bike in comparison to other bikes that we might be thinking of. This also goes for cargo bikes. So cargo bikes similarly take up a lot more space. And so especially if you have any bike commuters that are also parents, people might use cargo bikes to drop off their kids before going to work and then picking their kids up from school when they're leaving work. And so it's important for them to be able to have specifically a cargo bike that might take up a bit more space. And of course, other commuters might use a cargo bike for different reasons, maybe for running errands and other things. And then last but not least on this particular list, I wanted to talk about scooters. So obviously scooters, elephant in the room, are not bikes, but in many ways they operate very similarly as a transportation option. People who scooter to work may likely use bike lanes, the bike trails, and they also take up a lot less space, similar to how bikes take up a lot less space than cars. Also, since scooters can be quite small, I know a lot of people simply fold them up and keep them under their desk. And so a lot of their needs will kind of mirror some of the things that we're talking about when we're talking about providing for bike commuters. And for exploring all of these different commuters, as well as other ones that I might not be speaking to, you can work with us at GoDCGo to do a commuter survey, and we can try to learn what types of commuters you currently have at your work site, as well as what kind of commuters might be that you might have should you have different like amenities and things to support scooting and biking at the work site. So we already talked about a lot of different strategies to have a successful bike ready workplace, such as the storage, showers, laundry, and different repair and maintenance tools. And we also talked a little bit about Capital Bike Share and the corporate membership. So normally Capital Bike Share is $120 for an annual membership. And then as part of the corporate membership, it is $70 per sign up, and employers can provide this at either a full or partial subsidy where the employer pays 35 and the employee pays 35. And what's also nice about this benefit is you can offer it to all your employees, but ultimately only pay per sign up. And that kind of ensures that you are paying it towards the employees who would value it the most, for any of the many reasons or reasons that we have yet to talk about. I also know that some employers in the area might not necessarily have a capital bike share station as close to their work site as they'd like. And so if you have an interest in buying a capital bike share station, you can also reach out to me and I can connect you to try to get one up and running close to your work site. Another way that you can support your bike commuters is by offering different on-site events. So we talked about Cabby one-on-one, but another way is having challenges, such as like an annual challenge like Bike to Work Day, where you can create some friendly competition among employees and encourage people who regularly bike, as well as people who maybe haven't tried it yet, to give bike commuting a try. Similarly, you can also offer resources and information at an on-site fair. And once again, you can have GoDCGo come on site to help support that, where we bring a whole bunch of different free information to tell your employees not only about the amenities that you may already be offering, but as well about the resources that exist in DC and the larger region for them to take advantage of. Another way that you can support biking is through financial incentives. So some of you may already be familiar with Commuter Cash. The Commuter Cash app is something that is run by our partners at Commuter Connections. And for every time that someone sustainably commutes to work and logs that trip, they can get cash for every work trip done in peak hours. And if they do it consistently, they can earn up to $600 in a year. And so this is a great and completely free way that employers can incentivize biking just by making sure their employees are aware of that great program. But they can also create their own program and offer financial incentives for biking. So I know I've seen some employers do something similar, perhaps like offering like $5 per day up to a certain maximum. And then earlier we talked about how, since biking is a relatively inexpensive mode of getting to work, employer subsidies can also go a really long way towards supporting this as a commute option. And then transit benefits. So transit benefits are also very helpful for your employees generally, especially those who already take transit. But they also are really helpful for bike commuters in terms of the last mile bike commuters that we talked about, but also in terms of people who might occasionally bike commute and occasionally commute by transit. And another way that you can help support them is having real-time transit display screens, such as like in your lobby. And at GoDCGo, we can also help support looking into that as an option. We have a vendor list that we can share with you. And that can be lovely because as people are leaving the building, they can look at the display screen and say like, okay, the metro stop that I need to go to has the train I want to take in X amount of minutes. I'm leaving now. Great. I'm well timed for that. And then we also talked about guaranteed ride home. Some employers create maybe their own program or supplement guaranteed ride home just to give that extra, quote unquote commuter insurance for people who want to try commuting in a sustainable fashion, such as through bike commuting. I've worked with some employers who, for their employees who take a sustainable mode like biking, walking, taking transit during the day, they have, a rideshare subsidy if they need to go visit a client, or they offer, bikes that people can take, or scooters people can take to go visit a client site if that makes sense for your business. And then another way that you can support people who are bike commuting is through flex time. So if at the end of the day, it's the weather conditions are not so great, it's raining, but it looks like the rain is about to wrap up in like an hour or 30 minutes, offering the flexibility so that your employees can work a little bit later and then have a safer ride home is super helpful. And the knowledge that they can like flex that time later to leave a little bit earlier another day is a great way to maintain that work-life balance, as well as taking advantage of, prioritizing bike commuting. And then I also want to talk about how a staggered schedule can also help. I know a lot of people have something like that in terms of, driving home, but since sometimes, bikers are also sharing the roads with like cars, offering the opportunity for people to come into work a little bit earlier or a little bit later at like a staggered schedule can be helpful so that, bikers can take advantage of those windows where the roads might be calmer. In DC, we have 180 miles of trails as well as bike lanes. So there's a lot of space for bikers generally, but there's still some of those roads where it's really helpful and feels a lot more safe if they can take advantage of a slightly less congested road. So we talked about a lot of different things, and this is just like a sample of a lot of different ways that you can set yourself up for a really competitive set of bike related and bike commuting amenities and supports. But I will say this is non-exhaustive, and at GoDCGo, we can work with anyone with any type of budget or interest to create something that is truly custom and unique to your worksite's needs through any of our complimentary consultations. Okay, so GoDCGo has a transportation all-star program where we recognize employers for the work that they may already be doing. And so since many of these things that we either talked about today or did not get a chance to talk about, you may already be offering practical supports to improve your employees' commutes. And we want to recognize that. And so we have 4 levels of recognition: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And each are related to increased rewards, markability, and visibility for your organization. Going all the way up, reaching the platinum level, you can be eligible for us to write success stories about the cool work that you might be doing, as well as having a chance for a free 1-year membership at Best Workplace for Commuters, among other benefits. And so if you're interested at all, I highly recommend you schedule a meeting with us to see what your designation level may be. And for anyone who schedules a meeting today specifically, we are going to be offering 3 Capital Bike Share day passes that you can raffle off to your employees for anyone who is able to either schedule a meeting and have that be on the books today, or who has a few minutes after Q&A to talk with us and answer a few questions. Okay. Last but not least, we have a few upcoming events for employers in the next couple of months. So if you want to stay fully up to date, please subscribe to our employer newsletter so you can get all the details on that. And then this is the contact information for both me and Riley. And if anyone needs the previous QR codes, I can also go back if people need an extra second to pull that.
If anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop them in. I only saw Renata's question about bike repair stations. Renata sent me another message if I didn't fully answer your question.
Here, for a few seconds, in case anyone didn't get a chance to grab this link. And then for this one. Yeah, thank you.